welcome to / welcome back to the Doll Mom podcast. We have such a amazing episode, amazing start to 2026 for the podcast, because today we have on somebody who I really admire and I just really adore in the American Girl community. We have Blake Changnon. Blake, how are you?
Hello, Mal. I am doing great. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm so excited to have you. I'm so excited you're here. I cannot wait for today's conversation. Today we're going to be getting to know Blake. How did Blake get into dolls? And then we're going to be talking about his toy museum and his in-person exhibits. So I feel like without further ado, let's get this amazing episode started with. Blake, how did you get into dolls?
That's a great question, Mal. And it's a great story. So I think what makes the story so great is it pairs really well with the stories that Pleasant Company and American Girl came out with. So really the background of how I got into dolls when I was a kid was because I loved stories. So when I was growing up, the American Girl books and the dolls, they felt like friends to me. They felt like someone I could confide in, that I could trust. And their stories really helped me understand my own feelings. And they kind of showed me that even when things are hard, that, you can be brave, you can be strong, you can still be kind, and you can keep going on. That's really how I got into dolls, specifically the American Girls collection dolls.
I love that. I definitely agree. American Girl does such a good job with the stories and the important lessons that you can learn from these books at any age. Like, I will go back and I will read them and I'm be like, man, this is like what I need right now. I need to be like stand up for more of what I believe in and just different things like that. They're just amazing.
Absolutely. And I think that is what has allowed American Girl to continue to thrive for 40 years. It's absolutely, the dolls are the thing that I think really gets the attention from people, but I think it's the stories that are going to last forever. The dolls and their collections will change over time. We've obviously seen that with American Girl and Be Forever and kind of going back to the older historical characters that we know and love. But I think it's those stories and what they've meant and what they mean to children back when they were growing up with American Girl. So think of those who were growing up in the late 80s and early 90s to children that are growing up today who may be picking up, for example, Meet Kirsten or Addie Learns a Lesson and reading those for the first time.
So who was your first doll?
This is a good question. So my first doll was Samantha, but if I had to say, I would say my first three characters that I fell in love with were Samantha, Kirsten, and Addie. And the reason why I love those three specifically is they each taught me something special. Kirsten showed me how to be brave. Addie taught me about hope. And Samantha showed me kindness and generosity.
Their books are so well done. I remember when I first read Addie's series, I was just so taken back and just blown away. And it honestly made me cry. Like, I remember just sitting there with my book open and just like tears pouring down my face because it was just it's just so amazing. To anybody who hasn't read the American Girl books, I don't want to spoil it for you, but you really are missing out on just so many different things.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Mal, like you said, these books, yes, they're aimed for, children, 8 to 9 years old, but no matter your age, no matter if you're a teenager, a young adult, or maybe you're 99, these stories provide so many great lessons and so many, wonderful opportunities to learn something. And, they'll make you cry. I think what American Girl or Pleasant Rowland did so well when she created the company as Pleasant Company and what has now formed into American Girl is she didn't shy away from the hard parts. But I think what we've learned is that these young children are ready to learn about these topics and ask those questions. And I think that is what has allowed these books to just thrive over 40 years. It's not shied away from those very sometimes hard, lessons that children need to learn. I think that's just why they've done so well. And quite frankly, have made people cry, including me.
Yes. And I would also say just growing up with American Girl, they made me want to learn about history. And so I remember growing up and being in school, and when we got to like a certain unit with our not our American Girl, our US history thing in school, our classes and stuff, we would talk about the time periods where the dolls were set in. And I remember being so excited because I was like, I kind of know about this, and I get to know more about my doll in a way too. So I think Pleasant Rowland and the authors just do such a good job with being honest and real and accurate with everything that they come out with. And it promotes learning.
Absolutely. No, it promotes learning. It promotes a love for not only wanting to learn, say, history, but also reading, which I know was very important, or is still very important to Pleasant and Valerie Tripp and Connie Porter and Janet Shaw, who all wrote some of those early books for Pleasant Company. I think what is so cool is that Pleasant Company, when it was first created in 1986, like when it launched, and I have heard Pleasant say this on a couple of different videos that I have found on the internet, is that Pleasant Company wasn't just a doll company. It was a book publishing company. It was a clothing company. It was obviously the toy company. It was a company for children. You learned history, you learned how to read, and you could play with these beautifully crafted dolls and accessories and live out their stories and learn through them. And so I think that's just amazing that she was able to create not just a toy company, but kind of like all of those three in one, and have it succeed 40 years later.
Kind of shifting gears a little bit. I know American Girl is a huge part of your life, but do you collect any other doll brand, or have you played with any in the past?
I would say that American Girl is probably the prominent doll brand that I collect and played with as a kid. However, I did have a couple of Barbies growing up. There are some collector Barbie dolls that I'm like, oh, I really want that. Monster High was another one that I was probably a little too old to want to play with those, but really loved the meaning behind the brand and what it stood for. And so I do have a couple of those in my collection as well. My mom gave my sister a Madame Alexander doll, not one of the like collector ones, but it was a little baby doll that was similar to one that she had. And so I kind of wanted to learn more about Madame Alexander. And so I have a couple of those in my collection as well. But I would probably say those are the main ones. I'm also a big Disney fan, was for a really long time as a child. And so I do have a couple of Disney dolls in my collection as well that came from the Disney store or from the parks.
I loved Disney growing up too, and I would always look at the Disney, I think they're called the Disney Animator dolls.
Yes.
Loved those. I love the Barbie versions of the dolls too. Oh, love Barbie. I had a couple Monster Highs growing up too. I like Monster High as well. And then I remember Ever After High, and then the whole thing. Yep. It was a thing.
I remember Ever After High. I think I don't know where I was in school, but those had come out while I was either finishing high school or starting college, Ever After High. But I remember watching those shorts on YouTube, Sing with Monster High, and just kind of like, wow, just the animation, the story behind those, and kind of just, be true to who you are. I thought those were really important lessons. And so I really loved those. And I'm glad that, Monster High has kind of made a comeback. Not that we need to sidetrack to, for American Girl, but, we've seen Barbie make a comeback. We've seen Monster High make a comeback. So I'm very happy to see that a lot of these brands that I grew up with that maybe had a slow period here and there are still making the waves and coming back. And I think it has to do with the nostalgia and, parents who grew up with those brands are now getting those dolls and accessories for their own kids or nieces or nephews. And so I think that plays a lot into it.
I was so excited when Monster High came back. Like, oh my goodness. Anyways, kind of getting back into the American Girl world. We could go down a whole different road with that. What's the most unusual or unexpected item in your collection, and what's the story behind it? I thought this would be a really fun thing to ask you because you have such a big doll collection.
I'm sitting right here in what, my husband and I call our guest room, but I will probably say it's the doll room. there's a bed in here for if guests come over, but really it's the doll room. And I'm sitting here at my desk, and I have two dolls sitting in front of me that are very special to me. And I would probably say that these are an unexpected item in my collection, just because I never thought I'd ever own one of these. And those are Pleasant signed signed Pleasant Roland dolls. You see them. Yes, you see them on social media, you see them in YouTube videos. And, I think the dream, even as a kid, when I knew that these were around, I was like, oh, someday, but they go for quite a little bit of money. The two that I have in front of me, I have a signed Kirsten and I have a signed Samantha. And the signed Kirsten doll came out of the blue. And that's because I got a call from one of my friends. Her name is Janine Naprakowski, and a good friend. She loves American Girl just as much as you and I do. And she was working on an essay regarding the comparison and relationship between American Girl and Girl Scouts. And her essay eventually became published in the American Girl Anthology, that new collection or that new book of collection of essays. And she had reached out wanting to talk to me about some of the catalogs that I had in my collection, specifically a couple of years in the 90s where there was a Girl Scout uniform that American Girl or Pleasant Company was producing. And so I got her connected with it, and we just kind of formed a friendship. She works in the museum and archive world, and I knew that was a world that I really enjoyed and loved, but had never made it a field where I could, make a profession of it. I work in marketing and communications. That's what I do full time. And so I was just like a little kid at a candy shop wanting to ask her all these questions. Well, anyway, so I give her, some scans of some of the catalogs that I have and where Girl Scouts is. And during that conversation, she tells me that she works really closely, and I believe she said she was a board member, and I think currently is, of the store in White Plains, New York, called Girl Again. And it's a beautiful store where they sell kind of gently used American Girl products. So people are allowed to donate this product, and the store resells it, but they work specifically with individuals with, I believe it's autism, to kind of help them, develop the skills that they're going to need to better themselves in the world and to learn, different skill sets. And so she had said that someone had donated a signed Kirsten doll, and the first person that they thought of was me, and said, we'd love to have, give this, not necessarily give it to you, but which would have been great, but, would love to offer this to you as something that you can buy. And so we worked out a deal, and part of the deal was, let's make this let's benefit each other. And so I put together a social media campaign where really wanted to highlight the store, highlight their mission and what they're all about, and kind of give that history of American Girl as well in it. And then it all kind of came down to the moment of taking the train from Washington, D.C., where I'm located, to New York City, and then taking another train out to White Plains, New York, to pick up the doll. But while I was there, I kind of did an Instagram live where I gave a tour of the store. We talked to their executive director. We talked to a lot of the employees at the store, what it is that people could find. And while I was there, they showed me the signed Kirsten, and I was able to show that on the Instagram live. And so that truly means a lot to me. It doesn't come with her certificate of authenticity, and I don't believe it came with the original book that she came with. But she's beautiful. I love her. She sits here on my desk, and it's just, just so beautiful. She came with her original dress and her apron and her little pocket and her spoon and her amber heart necklace and her bonnet and everything. It's just beautiful. And then I found the signed Samantha on eBay for a very good price. And what's different about this one is this one was actually addressed to either an employee at Pleasant Company at the time or to a child of a Pleasant Company employee. Pleasant Roland was known to sign some of those dolls, and so for employees and their families. And so this one is marked in, for a special little girl or employee, and it was signed with 1992. So that one did not come with a certificate authenticity or its box or any of that stuff, but she has her original dress on, her original bow, and I was able to find some accessories from that time period to kind of make sure that it kind of all fit together. So those, I would say, are the two unexpected items in my collection that I didn't think I'd ever get someday, if that makes sense. And
Yeah.
I'm just so happy to have them. And of course, now I'm like, well, I feel like I got to finish the trio, you know? I feel like
Yeah.
I have to find a signed Molly, but it's not something that I'm in the market for right now. That is something that could definitely come later in life. I would say those are the most unexpected items in my collection. But if I could add to that, Mal, really quickly, I
Yeah.
do love these because, you know, Pleasant signed these. But I will say the other dolls in my collection that really mean a lot to me are the ones that I had from my childhood. You know, I saved up my money. I was able to buy those.
I love that. Oh my goodness. I'm kind of tearing up because that's
Oh.
such a sweet little story. Oh my gosh. I just love that. And oh my goodness, when you mentioned Girl Again, I love Girl Again. I went to visit their store summer of 2019. So I know they're in a new space now. I haven't been able to visit the new space, but they were so cool and so lovely. And the treasures in that store, oh my goodness. Thank goodness I don't work there or have any part of that, because I would probably be bringing home multiple things every week. Because it's just so many fun treasures and all that. Shifting into the doll social media world, how did you get into the doll social media world?
Oh, that's a good question. So I've always been as a marketer, I've always been on social media. You kind of have to know the trends and what's going on in the world. And so I would always follow American Girl on my personal account. I always did. And that was really fun. Seeing all the, you know, things that they would post. I, you know, remember, I don't think when Samantha's original archival happened, I don't think that social media was that popular, but I remember when Be Forever came back or Be Forever kind of launched and they brought her back from the archives. So like, I remember that so well, and the Instagram and all that kind of stuff. But, me getting in the doll world is really kind of the museum and how that came to be. Where that kind of led to was just, you know, that the pandemic happened and I had, you know, amassed this huge collection of American Girl stuff that, you know, as a kid, I was only allowed to have the doll and an accessory set, but as an adult, I had real money and was able to buy what I wanted to. And so, I had just amassed this big collection, really wanted to show it to family and friends. And I think that's where this virtual toy museum came from, or this idea for it was to kind of just show the collection that I have with my family and friends. We didn't know when we were going to be able to see each other. I was living in Nashville, Tennessee at the time, and all of my family and extended family lived back home in the Chicago suburbs or in Illinois. So really didn't know what was going to happen. And so I kind of created this website to show my, you know, collection and let it grow. And then also in a way to kind of enhance my marketing and communication skills of like digital marketing and whatnot. So it was kind of a two for like, it's helping me. So I should buy another doll, you know, it's going to help me with my career.
Yes.
You know, that's how I justified it. And that's kind of where I knew once I did the website that I needed to have a social media platform as well. And so that's where the Changnon Family Toys and Collectibles Museum, both the website and the social platforms came from. And really, like I said earlier, Mal, you know, I thought this was just going to be something for family and very few friends, but it blew up. It was like a lot of people started coming into it. They, you know, wanted to learn more about the virtual exhibits I was doing. They loved the collection. And I realized that, okay, I have something here that is bringing a lot of joy to people. And how can I make this, you know, fun and enjoyable for a lot of people? So I would say that's kind of how I got into the social media, doll world, was through this museum that I kind of built, this virtual toy museum that I had built and kind of connected the two, because I figured, you know, people will either come to the website or I can connect with them on social media. And so I figured, why not do both at the same time?
Okay, so now we're officially going to be talking about your museum. So for anybody who has no idea what the CF Museum of Toys and Collectibles is, how would you describe it? Give me the rundown, Blake.
It's called the Changnon Family Museum of Toys and Collectibles, and that's a huge mouthful. So on social media and a lot of our other channels, you'll see it as CF museum TC, just because you kind of have to throw all of it in there. But really what this museum is, it's an online virtual toy museum or toys and collectibles museum. I take that back. Dedicated to my collection of just toys and memorabilia, and specifically Pleasant Company and American Girl items in my collection. And so what I would say is like the mission statement of my museum is really to preserve, to acquire, educate, and finally inspire like all kids of all ages through the collection that I've kind of put on loan. So like I own the collection and I use the museum as my outlet to kind of show it. And so that's basically how I would describe it. Excuse me, like what you will see on the website is probably 5% of what is in the collection. I have an offsite storage collection that houses 1% Christmas and 99% of it is American Girl and Pleasant Company. And it's not just dolls and accessories and clothing. It's all of that, but it's also a lot of paper. So think of all of the catalogs, think of any of like the American Girl newspapers that they created back then. You think of posters, you think of flyers, all of that kind of stuff. There's boxes of it. Don't get me started on the boxes and boxes of books that I have. There's so many iterations of, for example, let's start with like Meet Kirsten. You've got the original parchment, kind of color white book that came out in 1986. And then there was an update in the late 90s. And then there was that 2000s one where it was kind of blown up a little bit and kind of had the shiny gloss on it. And then you have Be Forever. And then Be Forever kind of went away. And then you have the new edition of these books. And then you kind of went back to the parchment for some characters and you didn't. So like I could have a Meet Kirsten I could look at and I'm going to have to open it to be like, what's the copyright date so that I know which girl it goes with because there's so many. But regardless, that is what the museum is. And so it kind of goes from toys and collectibles. So when I first started it, and we'll be celebrating our 5th anniversary in September of this year. So I can't believe it's been almost 5 years, which is amazing. Nothing like celebrating an anniversary the same year American Girl is celebrating an anniversary.
Iconic. Absolutely.
Right? I love it. But the goal was to really showcase a toy or a line of toys one year. And then the following year, show something that is toy related, but is more collectible and vice versa. So continuing that on and off. And that has obviously changed as the years have gone on, even though we've been around for almost 5, which is a short time. But like, for example, when I started the museum, it really was just to showcase my collection, as I had mentioned before, to family and friends. And at that time, American Girl was celebrating its 35th anniversary. And so I thought, what a great opportunity to show my collection American Girl products. And I thought, let's do the first one on toys. We'll showcase all the historical characters, so those that are currently available for purchase at that time, as well as those characters that have been archived. And we'll showcase parts of their collection through the 6 stories. And so I hired a professional photographer to come out to my house to kind of help me take these pictures. I bought backdrops. It was a big collection, but I didn't have as many dolls. So it was like, okay, we have to dress this one Kirsten 6 different times. And after a while, putting on Kirsten's shoes can be really hard. And so I was putting my brother, who was living in Nashville at the time, my partner at the time was helping me do stuff. I was having the photographer dress dolls and stage things for me. It was a big hoopla. But that was the first exhibit that we did. It did really well. And the next year we did an exhibit on the catalogs, and that did extremely well. And so we went back to toys and we did one on Addie. And I can get into the whole gist of these exhibits in a little bit, but really that is what this museum has come to is, yes, it's a museum, a family museum, my family museum of showcasing my toys and collectibles, but it's really at this point in time a museum dedicated to showing and preserving the history of Pleasant Company and American Girl.
I love that. And you could just tell, if anybody has been on the museum's website or the social media, you could just tell how much love and passion is within this and how well it's just put together. So we kind of got into this next question already with the last segment a little bit, but when did you realize that this was turning into something much bigger than you originally imagined?
So that's a great question, and I know exactly when that happened. Our first exhibit launched, it'll be 5 years ago in September with what I call, I think it's American Girl, 35 years of strong characters. That was the title of my first exhibit, which kind of went through all of the different historical characters, including best friends and what their collections looked like. And I think the moment that I knew it was a big success was part of my role, even outside of my museum and what I do with American Girl in marketing communications, is looking at data. And so through the website that I built, I was able to look at my data and see how many visitors had come. And I thought, okay, this is pretty big. We had 38,000 visitors come to the site in 1 year. I was really impressed by that. As I was thinking about my next exhibit, what is that one thing that all of us, if we had a doll or not, what was the one thing that we all had and, as part of like the American Girl experience? And that was those catalogs. And I really thought, okay, catalogs could be considered collectibles. And so I thought, I'm going to do, and Mal, when I thought about this, it all came in my mind. I could picture it. I thought, I'm going to scan the covers of all the catalogs in my collection. And then I'm going to scan the insides of the first catalog that I have, the one that, is a kind of a duplicate of the 1986 catalog, though it's copyrighted 1987, but it's entirely the same, except for the copyright date. And I thought I'm going to scan that from front to back, and so that people can really see, where the brand has evolved from, the 1980s to, at that time, like the 2020s. But I'm going to scan every cover, and then I'm going to put a little description of like what's inside. But I thought deep down, I thought, I really want people to be engaged. They were engaged a little bit on my site before. They were engaged on social media. How do I keep people engaged and wanting to come back to my site? And so I thought, well, I'll have people request scans of their favorite catalogs. I thought, who wouldn't love to see a catalog from 1993 that they had, or a catalog from 2003 that they had, And so I thought, I'm going to do that. Now, that was probably the worst decision I ever made. And this was the second realization that I knew that this was getting bigger than I thought it was going to get. Because in the first 3 months, that second exhibit launching, that virtual exhibit on the catalogs, we had over 100,000 people to the site. And we had over 150 requests for scans.
Oh my gosh.
And Mal, as well as I do, these catalogs from the 90s to early 2000s, which were the ones that everyone was requesting, are not skinny mini. We're talking about like 180 pages of catalog that needed to be scanned. And I was a one-person, shop. And so on a quarterly basis, I was trying to scan as many catalogs as I could. And then, of course, you have to crop them so you're not like getting other parts of whatever you took a picture of, in there. And then you got to make sure it's in correct order. And then you upload it and you're like, oh my gosh, the site's going to crash because there's so many pictures. And that's the moment that I realized, okay, this is much bigger than I imagined it would be. And the social media engagement was outside of this world. I was getting 300 likes on pictures. I was getting people commenting. People were resharing. People were reaching out. I was asked to be on other podcasts. I was asked to talk about stuff. There were articles coming out at that time about American Girl. And if anyone typed in American Girl, for some reason, my website came up as one of the things. So I had reporters reaching out. It was just, I was like, okay, this is bigger than I anticipated. And I'm just doing this for the fun of it, kind of like I wasn't doing it to make money. I wasn't doing it to, show that I'm the number one person. I was just doing it because I love this and I wanted people to see these catalogs and this collection. And so I think it was that moment. This was bigger than I imagined, that people are actually viewing it and looking at it, and that this is something that I should look at and potentially take seriously of what are my next exhibits going to be? Could I partner with museums and other institutions for exhibits or pop-up exhibits? And would this ultimately stay as a virtual museum, or would this someday branch out into a physical location?
Wow. Okay. That is crazy.
And what I really loved about this virtual exhibit on the catalogs was to really make it engaging. You could fill out a form and there was an optional message box where it would be like, tell me why this catalog means so much to you. And it was so wonderful. One of the people wrote in there, I remember getting the catalog of Felicity in 91 underneath the Christmas tree. And she goes, I begged my parents for that for Christmas. And she goes, I finally got it. And she goes, now I'm a parent with a little girl and we are going through a catalog and she's getting Mary Ellen for Christmas. And I find that so cute because Mary Ellen was written by Valerie Tripp and so was Felicity. So it's kind of like, ooh, okay, they're connected somehow. And she goes, we're able to open the catalog that she has with Mary Ellen in it, but we're also able to come to your website and look at the catalog that I grew up with. And we're able to create this new shared memory. And I thought, wow, that's amazing. I just didn't think I was creating that kind of experience for people. And it was just so fun. And then sometimes people would ask for scans of catalogs. And, I've got tubs and tubs of these catalogs now that sometimes I don't even remember what's inside of them. And so I may only have one copy of a catalog that someone wants a scan of. And when I open it, I realize, okay, someone has circled what they wanted in here. And I thought, as a collector, I thought, do I buy another catalog to kind of make it look clean? And I thought, no, I don't want to do that. That was what a lot of people did growing up. They'd get that catalog and they would circle what they wanted, or they'd put an X over something they wanted. And I thought that's a fun experience for a kid or even an adult to come back and look at and be like, oh my gosh, you can tell someone really loved this catalog because they circled or X'd out what they did not want their mom or dad to buy for them. And I just thought that was amazing.
Yeah, that brought me back. Oh my goodness. I remember when I got my first catalog from American Girl. It was my first introduction to the brand. I was in kindergarten, and it was a holiday 2009 catalog. And Blake, this catalog is awful. It is like, I've taken it everywhere with me because I was obsessed with it. I loved dolls growing up. Like, it doesn't even have the cover to it anymore. Like, I don't even know where the cover is at this point because I took it everywhere, and it's so beat up. There's rips in it, and there's all kinds of X's all over the page, like, because I wanted everything, because everything was just so cool. And it was my first time ever experiencing something like that because I grew up loving dolls. And to have a doll magazine, this is heaven. This is what I've always dreamed of. And then I got to go to the American Girl store and all this, and that was just so life-changing. But yeah, that catalog has been through the ringer because even after 2009, I would take it everywhere. Like summer 2010, I took it to like our local vacation spot that we always went to every summer. And here I am still looking at it. My mom's like, why are you looking at this old catalog? You got a new one in the mail like last week for summer. And I'm like, Mom, there's just something about this catalog. I just love it.
I think that's what's connected us all together. Some people grew up with just one doll. Some people grew up with 30 dolls. Some people grew up not being able to have a doll. And I think the one thing that we all could relate to and own if we wanted to was that catalog, because it came in the mail for free and you could have that shared experience with your friend or your family or your parent. And so when I did that exhibit, kind of like what you're saying, people just fell head over heels. It brought them back to a time that they had forgotten. And it was just something special about that. And I thought, I don't know how I'm going to top this exhibit. This is done so well, but I knew I couldn't continue doing the scans after a year. I knew I had to move on. And we did. We moved on to an Addie exhibit showcasing her entire collection, and we're almost done with that. It's taken a couple of years to kind of showcase that, but we showcased both the toy side of her collection and the collectibles part. So I think of the stuff that you could get at Hallmark or the pastimes and all that kind of stuff. And that has done extremely well because I think a lot of people did not realize there were some of these other products that were licensed in the early 2000s by Pleasant Company and American Girl, featuring those characters. And so it's just been so magical to see how this museum has grown from the little, I don't want to call it little because it took a lot of work, that first exhibit that I did, but like to see how far we've come from that first exhibit to a catalog exhibit to the Addie exhibit to, the pop-up exhibits that I've done in person now. It's just amazing to see how it's just grown over the last 5 years.
Yes. Speaking of exhibits, this brings me to my next question. How do you decide what exhibits to create, and what is the process behind creating them?
That's a great question. So let's talk, I'll talk about Addie because that's the current exhibit that we currently have online. After the catalogs were completed, the character Addie Walker, in 2023 was going to be celebrating her 30th anniversary. I thought, okay, this is amazing. This is a character that has lasted for 30 years. Her stories are so important and they still matter. And I thought with everything that's kind of going on in the world, that it would be a great opportunity to kind of bring the light back to Addie and her stories and remind people of, what happened during that time period through the eyes of a 9-year-old girl. That's when I realized, okay, I could do a twofer exhibit with this one. I could do the toys and the toys and collectibles for it. I could do the toys of showcasing Addie and her first 6 stories and showcasing the Be Forever books and all of the mysteries and short stories and all the outfits and accessories that came with that. And then really showcase all of extra materials that came out to kind of support Addie and support the American Girls collection that you would kind of consider collectible, but not necessarily a toy. And so that was really fun just because, I got to dress up one doll like 30 different times in all these different outfits. And a lot of the collection, Mal, where I live, I can't have it all out and about with me. A lot of it is packed up and it's in storage. And so it was really fun to go to I call it my archive, my storage facility. I call it my archive and go there and pull out Addie bins and these Addie boxes and to put her, bring her life together or bring her story to life through these accessories and take the photos and display things and all of that. It's just really fun to kind of showcase that. And so that's kind of how I determine, what the next exhibit is going to be, is kind of like, is there an anniversary? Is there something important happening in the world that could, connect with these characters? Or have I seen something online that's trending and, could do well? And so I think I thought about that when I did the catalogs. And obviously Addie was celebrating an anniversary. And that's why we did that for Addie.
What's one thing about your museum or your collection that you wish more people knew?
I think a lot of people think what I have online is the collection and that's it. And I think that's a misconception that I think a lot of people have with museums and galleries in general. Having lived in the DC area, I have the privilege of going to a lot of the Smithsonian institutions and seeing wonderful displays and wonderful exhibits. And I have made that unfortunate error sometimes where I'll walk to the American History Museum and, for example, I'll see the entertainment exhibit that they've done where the ruby slippers are and a few other things. And I'll remember seeing, the ruby slippers, and I'll remember seeing like Miss Piggy and Kermit the Frog. And the next time I come, Kermit the Frog and Miss Piggy are gone and they've been replaced with Gonzo and a couple of other characters. And, I read about it and they go, yeah, we put Miss Piggy and Kermit back in storage. We're only showcasing 10% of all of our collection in this museum. I think that is news. That wasn't not news to me in a sense of, oh, I didn't know that. But I think a lot of people that I have talked to think, okay, your collection that's online on your website, that's it. And like I've told you, I think what's on my website is probably 5% of what my entire collection is. I'd love to showcase the entire collection on the website, but there's a way and a reason to do it. I have complete collections for the first 6 characters and for Kit, and a lot of the later characters. And those would be fun characters to showcase on the website. But I think some people have reached out to me and said, hey, Blake, here's Felicity and here's this. I'm willing to give this to you. And I have to break it. One, do I really need another, like, say, example, Felicity or more? Not necessarily. It does take a lot of space, but I do have a complete collection for that already. I just haven't had the opportunity to show it on the website. And so I think that's one thing that I wish people knew was I have this big collection and people are able to reach out to me and say, hey, do you have this? Do you have that? I'm working on a research project, or I'd really like to see, I know you're not doing scans of catalogs, but didn't know if you had this catalog. So I'm working on a dissertation or I'm writing an article. I think that's the one thing I really wish people knew is that I have so much stuff and I'm wanting to share it with people, but I just don't have a means or a way to show all of it at once. And so
what would you say to a listener who's rediscovering dolls as an adult and wondering if it's okay to embrace that joy again? I know we kind of talked about people reaching out to you and having such a sweet story with sharing it with other generations, with their daughter, with their kids. What would you say to someone who's just an adult and wants to get back into dolls?
I'd say go for it. There's nothing to lose at this point. I used to be very scared to talk about my collection and showcase it to friends and family because I was scared of what they would say, would they judge me, would they think differently of me. And I think as I've gotten older, that doesn't bother me anymore. I really don't care. It's something that truly makes me happy. And so if American Girl or Barbie, Polly Pocket, Madame Alexander baby dolls, or even Disney bring a joy to you, I say go for it. This may age me, but YOLO, you only live once, do what you love and do what brings a smile, and if that is, I grew up, say, for example, if someone says, I grew up with Samantha and I really want to get her, 6 outfits so that I can display her on a shelf or display her above my fireplace or on my desk throughout the year, do it. That's what I would say. Do it and know that there is a whole community, an entire community of doll lovers, of American Girl fans, of collectors who have that same passion and want to meet you and want to embrace it with you. So that's what I would say.
I love that. A good friend of mine once told me that just do what you love because your heart doesn't care what anybody else thinks. And I think that's so true when it comes to doll collecting.
Absolutely.
Just do what you love.
Absolutely. Do what you love. # do what you love.
Yes. So now we're going to be getting into the pop-up museums, which I'm so excited. Blake, what drove you originally to start doing pop-up exhibits?
I did not actually have the idea to do a pop-up exhibit, if you can believe it. The idea came to me, or didn't come to me. It kind of traveled to me from a couple of different people. All of a sudden, this librarian comes rushing up to me and she goes, I hear that you own a museum. And she hands me her business card and she goes, send me an email and we will talk. And I was like, okay. So I sent her an email. We got on a phone call and she said, I think we should do a pop-up exhibit, Blake, for just a day. We'll hold down one of the program rooms that we have. We'll set up tables and you can showcase part of your collection. And so we thought about that and I said, okay, I think that sounds great. And she goes, well, Blake, the first time or the next time that we have availability would be in September. And she goes, I think that would be a perfect time to, and we both said at the same time, a school themed event, what a perfect opportunity to kind of bring the school stories of American Girl to a library where school has just started. Now that's how it all started, was at this event, or really just sitting saying, yes, I will do this event. We had no idea what this event was going to look like. I had no idea what I was going to do. And so after that meeting, I did a lot of thinking and figuring out what was this going to look like. I really wanted to, these pop-up exhibits, or really the first pop-up exhibit that I did was really, I wanted to honor the stories of these Pleasant Company characters. And so what I thought was there's always an opportunity to showcase some of the newer characters like, Nikki and Isabel or Courtney or even Mary Ellen. But I think what really brought people out to that first event with Valerie Tripp was a lot of the people grew up reading Felicity or Samantha or Molly or Kit or Josefina. And so we decided not only would we do, this back to school themed, exhibit, but really do only showcase the characters from the Pleasant Company era. And we decided to include Kit in that just because we know that Kit was developed under Pleasant's guidance, even though she had sold the company at that time to Mattel. And we knew that she had like a really good kind of school collection. So I knew that, okay, the characters were all going to have their desk. They were all going to have their lunchbox. They were going to have their school bag and accessories. They were going to be in their school outfit. But I thought, okay, I just don't want to display the dolls. How can I make this kind of an experiential event or pop-up for people? And so I decided to create posters for each character, and they would get 2 each. And as you kind of go in chronological order, the way that it was set up, and the best way I can do this is like an upside down U, and there were 2 doors. So like you would enter in one door and you would start with Felicity and you'd end with Molly, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And I did this on purpose because, with the American Girls collection, you could either read Samantha's first 6 stories in order. You could read about, her home and her family, her school story, her holiday, her birthday, summer, and kind of winter story. Or if you really wanted to know about the school and what school was like growing up, but from like over the cross of like 100, 200 years, you could do it vertically and read all the school stories. And so I thought this is a great opportunity to show how school has changed over the years, but stayed the same. And so I developed these posters, and each poster would have each character, like I said, would have 2 posters. One poster would give a brief summary of what Josefina Learns a Lesson is about. Like Josefina's school story. If you were to read that book, what are you going to learn? But just kind of give a brief overview. But what I did was I intertwined the items that were in the collection. So like, for example, if someone's reading Addie Learns a Lesson, the poster for Addie Learns a Lesson, I might talk about, Addie sits on her school bench with her slate and her lunch pail or something that she gets from her mama. And inside are the, love cookie letters, and I would bold every item that was going to be on display, because there would be a poster at the beginning of the exhibit kind of telling the viewer of like, here's what you're going to see. Be on the lookout for bolded words, as those are the words, as those words are what you're going to see, are the objects that you're going to see on display. And then kind of go from there. So like you start with reading the poster, and then in the middle of the table was the character's setup. And then the last poster for that character was what I called a peek in the past. You know how like the original books, you would read it, but in the end there'd be like an essay or two about what it was like growing up, say in 1864 or 1944.
Yes.
So what I decided to do was take those essays. I wrote my own essays based on what was in those books about what it was like growing up or going to school during that time period, and really how that stayed the same. So really you're getting, for example, that character's school story and her objects. You're seeing it in person in the middle, and then you're ending it with, okay, this is how school was different, or this is why school was this way in the 1930s. But it's still similar because we're still learning the same subjects in school, And so it was just really wonderful of how I was able to kind of put these together. And what's really cool, Mal, is that the posters, and I know this is a podcast, so if viewers out there wanting to know what this looked like, I have videos of it on the Instagram. So if you visit us on Instagram at CF Museum TC, you'll be able to see these videos. But what's really cool, and the only reason why I say that is the posters, I designed them to look like the old Pleasant Company books. So it has like the numbers at the bottom that kind of give you the year that they're there. You have like the title. And then the way that the text is on the poster board, I was able to take pictures of those items. So like if we're talking about Addie's lunch pail and those love cookies, I took a picture of it and placed it on the board so that they could see it on the board and then look for it in the display. Almost like you're reading an American Girl book, because you'd see those little vignettes on those pages where there weren't the big illustrations. So it was almost like you were reading, but not really reading. It was almost like you were experiencing a live action version of that book that you were going to read, if that makes sense. And so it was a huge success. For that first event, we had 200 free tickets to give out. And within 8 days of tickets going live for people to get, they were all gone in 8 days. And
no way.
Yeah. And that was the first time, my understanding from the library, that something that fast had sold out. Which I thought was amazing. I know.
That's so incredible.
Very incredible. But what's even more incredible is we thought, okay, not every 200 not 200 people are going to show up. And I was right. 200 people didn't show up. Out of the 200 people that got free tickets, 190 people showed up.
Oh my gosh.
Okay.
That is still so insane.
I know. That's a huge turnout. We decided to do a pop-up that December for the holiday characters. And instead of showcasing 7, we showcased 10. We thought, I really want this to be an opportunity to show more characters and a different variety of holidays. We included Kaya and what celebrating was like for, Indigenous and Native American people. We included Rebecca, who celebrates Hanukkah. And we included Julie and Ivy, who celebrate, obviously Christmas, but also Chinese New Year. And so we were able to showcase all of those collections as well. That exhibit, we decided to up the tickets to 300, I think. And 300 tickets, free tickets, sold out in 10 days. Oh. And we got really bad snow and sleet that day.
No.
But 250 people showed up.
That's so amazing.
Yes. So we had a very great turnout, and I'm really happy with what that turnout looked like. And it was snowing, and it was crazy, and there was sleet, and it was so cold. but people showed up because they wanted to see it. We have future pop-ups that we're working on. A lot of them will take place this spring and early summer here in the DMV or DC, Maryland, Virginia area. We'll be celebrating the birthday stories.
Yep. Oh my gosh.
Which will be fun. And then the birthday story exhibit is going to take place at 2 different libraries. And then, so that's 2 pop-up exhibits. And then there's a third one that's going to do a kind of what I'm calling Step Into Their Stories, which is more about the meat books. And so you'll get to see the first 6 characters in their meat books. And so that's going to happen in the spring as well.
Oh my goodness. I am so excited. That is so exciting. The birthday stories. Oh my gosh. Like, I love the birthday stories so much. And the outfits that they have that American Girls came out with and are just so beautiful. Like, oh my goodness. And y'all, Blake's Instagram and his website's going to be linked in this podcast description of this episode. So don't worry, y'all. You can go follow him so then you don't miss out on when that exhibits are going to be and you could plan your trip to go see everything.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. Everything will be on the social media and it'll be posted to the website as well. But don't worry, for those who can't travel out to this area, I am in talks with various other institutions and museums across the country who have seen the success of these pop-up exhibits and want to do nothing super permanent, but more of a temporary, more than a day exhibit. And so those talks are happening. Can't give any details more than that, but they are happening. So don't worry, you West Coast, Midwest folks, we're working on trying to bring something out there as well.
That is so exciting. And once again, all of his information will be linked in the description of this podcast episode, so you guys can go follow it whenever something happens. Blake will probably post that on his website and social media, so you guys will not miss out on anything. Walk me through this. You started with back to school with American Girl, and then you did your holiday one, and now you're going to be doing future ones. What is the experience like compared to the virtual exhibits that you do? How much more prep do you have to put in? I know you went through a lot to put on those museums or those exhibits, but I guess just walk me through the whole planning process and being able to do something in person.
Absolutely. I'm glad you asked that question because it is very different. Because with a virtual museum, I can take the picture and write down the information, and then the doll, the outfit, the accessory gets stored away. That is true to an extent with a pop-up. A lot of the stuff is stored away, but it's different in terms of like you get to bring it out, you get to put it in a safe container to travel with and display it, and some of the individuals that come out to these exhibits maybe have seen these items before or they haven't. And so with the virtual exhibits, I feel like I give myself more time to figure out what those are going to look like and plan those more in advance. So like, for example, if I wanted to do an exhibit, next year in January for the website or the virtual museum, and say something happens where I just can't make it happen, I could push it back. Mm-hmm. And people aren't aware of it. Whereas with the pop-up, I'm making a planned commitment with an institution and we're signing papers. And once papers are signed and the word is out about this exhibit, it's kind of time crunch of, okay, I got to get everything out of the archive. I've got to make sure I have it. When it comes to creating these posters, not only am I writing the copy or the text for these posters, I'm also taking photos of those items and putting them, placing those photos on so that they know what to look for when they are doing or when they're reading through it and seeing the thing in person. So there is a little bit more of a pressure to get it done. When I've talked to some of the people who have come to these exhibits, they tell me that they were a Samantha, they were an Addie, that their children are reading those stories. And I asked, some of the newer characters? And they're like, no, we're only focused on the characters that we grew up. And so I think that also kind of tells me what these exhibits should be based on. And should I focus on, some of the newer characters, or should I include some of the older characters like Kaya and Kit and Julie and Rebecca, or some of the archived characters? So I think there's a lot that kind of goes into it. You should see the doll room before, like a week before the exhibit. The dolls are in their boxes lined up. I've got bins full of the characters' items. I have blue painter tape on the bags that say what these are because I have volunteers who come and help me put things out. I'll do the final, look and feel and, the tiniest little displays. I'll do all of that. But, some people don't know if this is a Kirsten item or if this is an Addie or a Josefina item.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes I'm like, put this all over here, put the posters up, I'll do this. And so it's a lot, there is that time crunch of like, can I get this done immediately? Because usually we set up the exhibit the day of and we take down the day of. So we only have like an hour and a half to set everything up and then 45 minutes to get out. It is so rewarding though. Mm-hmm. Really rewarding to put these up and hear everyone's, thoughts and experiences and memories. It's really fun.
So I will say, based off of photos and stuff that you shared of it online, it's very impressive, like the amount of work that you've done, and just you can tell how much hard work went into that, just with different photos and videos that you shared on both exhibits on social media.
No, it takes a lot of time and it is really fun. And I think there's ways that I can make it better each time, but I think what's so fun is seeing those who grew up with it in the 80s and 90s who now have children of their own, and they've passed down those dolls to the next generation and those stories to the next generation, and seeing those individuals light up. So the best example I can say is there was this lovely mom who walks in with her young daughter, and the mom is holding an Addie that was her childhood Addie. I couldn't tell if maybe the daughter was just not old enough to play with her Addie, but she had the new rag doll Addie that, like the plush dolls that American Girl has come up with. And she gave that plush doll Addie to her daughter right before this exhibit. This little girl walks in and immediately sees Addie and runs over, doesn't touch it because she, we had a volunteer at the beginning be like, you can't touch anything, stay behind the orange line. And the girl's like, oh, there's the orange line, can't touch it. But she ran up and she's like, there's Addie, Mom, that's Addie. And like holds up her little plush doll and is like, it looks just like her. And I got to talk with them and she goes, she and her daughter are reading all of these books. She walked up to the Samantha exhibit, a display that was right next to it. And she was talking about Samantha's like watercress sandwich. And I was like, are you sure it's called a watercress sandwich? I thought it was a cucumber sandwich. And she goes, no, Mr. Blake, right there on the board, it says watercress. And I had to like turn around and look at it. I was like, oh, you're absolutely right. She goes, yeah, we read Samantha Learns a Lesson yesterday. And she mentioned it in the book. And I was like, for a 4 or 5-year-old, that's amazing, so it's so wonderful to see, parents who grew up with these characters and obviously, made friends with these dolls and these characters and learned something from these books, pass that down to the next generation. And I think that is ultimately what Pleasant's vision was for the company. To see that kind of happen is just so magical. There's other display boards in the exhibit in the middle of the room that kind of give an overview of the exhibit, what you're going to see. Then there's a poster about Pleasant, which kind of gives a history of who she is and the company of Pleasant Company and American Girl, like an overview of that. And then an overview of what my museum has done and the exhibits that we have online. And then kind of a poster board of who I am. And it gives kind of a story of how did I get started? Why is Blake putting on this exhibit? People read that and then they look around the room and they find me and they're like, oh my gosh, you have a beautiful collection. I'm so, happy that you've been able to do this and American Girl has meant something to you. So It's been really fun.
We have now arrived at the end, which is so sad. Blake, thank you so much for coming on the Doll Mom podcast. I had so much fun with you today, getting to talk about American Girl, getting to talk about you and your exhibits and everything. I just really enjoyed having you on the podcast.
Oh, thank you so much, Mal. I am so excited that I could come on the podcast, that I could share my story, my museum, what American Girl and Pleasant Company has meant to me, and the future plans that I have with my museum. And I know we've met once. I hope we can meet again and maybe at one of my future exhibits, either this year, next year, or sometime in the future, as well as all of your listeners. And I'm just so grateful. So thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here and so proud of what you've been able to do in the doll community as well. So thank you, Mal, for all that you have done.
Oh, thank you. Everybody, if you haven't gone and follow Blake, What are you doing with your life? You need to. I have linked all of the social media platforms in the description of this box, as well as his website. You can go follow at CF Museum TC. Make sure you go follow him. Go give him some love because he is amazing and he deserves everything in the world. My name is Mal. I am at Dollies and Rainbows. If you haven't gone and checked me out on the internet, we are pretty much everywhere with that username. You want to make sure that you go follow my podcast on social media at Dollmom Podcast, the podcast you're currently listening to right now. Very fun all over there. We're on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and that's pretty much it. Oh, and we're fancy on Freds too. Anyways, thank you so much for listening to my podcast, everyone. I really appreciate it, and I hope everybody has such a good day, a good night, a good time. Until we talk next. Bye, everyone.